Okay. All right, so just to start off by saying that all my work is a response to London and my subjective engagement with London, walking around the city. So it is that idea of psychogeography, but yeah, a more kind of radical encounter, I suppose, or radical engagement with the city. I think in the 90s, the term psychogeography became kind of emptied of its original radical critique or radical content and became something a bit kind of coffee table and a bit light. I think when Will Self started that column in the, was it The Independent? I don't know, that was the end of it for me. So I thought really it was time to kind of reinvigorate it with something a bit more confrontational. And also my work relates very much to my concerns about the gentrification and regeneration programs in London. So I've been walking around over the last sort of 5 years, chronicling the changes and making drawings of buildings that are condemned and about to be demolished, and recording graffiti as well. And this was an attack on St Modwen, who won the contract to demolish Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre and Queen's Market in Upton Park as well. So I walk around a lot of areas and I make little sketches and little drawings in my sketchbook and take photos, and then I'll take them back to my studio and make much more kind of labour-intensive drawings like this. And these drawings are from the Haygate estate and the Aylesbury estate in Elephant and Castle, which is earmarked for demolition and all tinned up. On the top, one on the top right-hand side is actually the Tricorn Centre in Portsmouth, which is already gone. This is the Aylesbury estate again. So the reason I'm showing you these is because this is a kind of process that I go through with making the zine. So it starts off with the drawings and my ideas, and I write as well. So it's a kind of, it's quite a slow process actually getting the material together in terms of walking around and really considering the areas that I'm discussing. But once I actually come to making the zines, then it's really, the process is a lot quicker, more rapid. So these are all done with biro. Some of them, I do them when I'm actually out and about, and others back at the studio. And then I'll add some sort of fluorescent and sometimes add elements and traces of found graffiti or fragments of conversation and different elements that are found in certain spaces. This is in Dalston, which is, I think, a kind of flashpoint of contention, really, in terms of the rapid gentrification that I've seen. I mean, I first moved there 15 years ago, moved around various areas since, but the transformation's been obviously dramatic, and not really for the good of the area, I don't think. So then a lot of the drawings become fly posters as well. So I'll photocopy my own drawings and then kind of just collage them together. And this part of the process is just really kind of fast and reckless and not very sort of deeply considered. I don't like to spend too much time. And there's an obvious reference here to the sort of DIY punk aesthetic of the late 70s and early 80s. So I'm kind of thinking of Crass, Poison Girls, Conflict, all those sort of anarcho-punk bands at that time on the Crass label. And one of the reasons why I wanted to use this aesthetic was because it had been so heavily recuperated. You know, so as an aesthetic, it no longer had that power to shock on its own. I mean, it's a very kind of well-worn sort of trope to sort of see that kind of aesthetic and associate it with a kind of recuperated form of rebellion, you know, in Topshop or, you know, wherever, you know. It's like, it's become a kind of trite aesthetic. So part of my intention, I think, with my zine was that I wanted to restore a kind of radical content to the zine format and to the posters as well. So I started doing this zine in 2005, and I was a student at the Royal College then. So it was a really good way for me to combine my writing and my drawings as well, and photographs, and just put all this stuff together. Because I've always had this thing where I've been a writer as well, so I kind of always had this kind of conflict about, you know, what I should focus on, and obviously with the zine, it's an obvious vehicle for that. And each issue of the zine would be about a different area of London. So I'd go all around, not just East London, but tended to veer towards that mostly just because I lived there and spent most of my time there, but also did zines about Notting Hill, the West Way, walking underneath the West Way, Heathrow, this one, Elephant and Castle, as I mentioned before, just sort of sites of contention where there was some sort of social antagonism. And in a way it was about plotting those lines of social antagonism that were there, and sort of allowing these hidden currents or hidden channels to come through in the writing, in a way. I did one of my zines about the path of the River Fleet, which is one of London's lost rivers. It's a subterranean river. And I kind of used that as a metaphor in the writing for talking about the sort of repressed histories of London, which is really my main kind of concern with most urban regeneration schemes, that they are absolutely about erasing any sense of the past. I mean, there might be fragments of it kept for heritage, but really it's about pogroming out working class communities as far as I can see. So yeah, the work then kind of transforms and becomes other things. So work that I do, pages from the zine become posters, collages, front covers become posters. I really like the sort of fluidity and dynamism of the zine format, how my drawings can be, you know, in galleries or whatever, and that's really good. But with the zine, they're absolutely out there, and there's a sense that once you've got the zine out, it can end up anywhere, and it's kind of got a life of its own then. Same with the fly posting, and it was really important to me, especially when I was at the Royal College, to sort of feel that my work had currency outside the sort of white cube environment of the gallery scene. And I also do these paintings. So at the time at the Royal College, I was doing this kind of stuff. So these are massive, these are like life-size, these paintings. So they're really cumbersome, and the logistics of moving them around are really, you can imagine. So having like an A5 zine and posters, you know, it was a really good kind of counterpoise to that. Yeah, and then I was doing these massive drawings as well, so that's about 3 meters by 3 meters. So I've just put this in to show how, by doing the zine, it's kind of informed my large-scale work in the studio as well. So kind of breaking up the picture plane with these different inserts and different areas, having bits bleeding into each other, and, you know, the influence of fly posting and billboards as well. There's a sort of, you know, there's a circularity or something like that in the process, a kind of fluidity, where different elements feed into each other. So that's just a detail of that. And another detail. Yeah, so these are some more biro drawings that I made for the zine that then became fly posters, and this was at the time of the economic crash in 2008. Yeah, more fly posters. This was on the Olympic fence, so you can see it wasn't exactly a subtle intervention. This is when I was working with a collective called We Are Bad. So we were there was about 4 or 5 of us working together who felt strongly about the destruction of the Lower Lee Valley in the Olympics, and were kind of challenging the sort of the idea that it was a positive thing for East London. So yeah, and then the drawings again, the way that I've been showing them more recently does kind of relate back to the zine, you know, I kind of start to see them more as pages now. So it's really difficult for me in my practice to kind of draw the distinction or compartmentalise my practice really because of that sort of fluidity. And these drawings all relate to the Lower Lee Valley again. So these are drawings I did of places that have been demolished to make way for the Olympics. So these are like long gone now. This is all, you know, this is a kind of historical document in a sense. And yeah, they're all biro again. So yeah, the zine, I mean, it was really good for me. It sort of allowed me to get my name out there, and people started to respond quite strongly to it. When it came to me graduating from the Royal College, a lot of people were already aware of me because of it, and you know, it's been well received, and it's coming out as a book next year, which it's kind of strange really. It's obviously changes things, and it you know, it's going to be registered, and you know, people are going to talk about it in different terms, but I'd got to the point where I felt as a form for myself, I'd kind of come to the end of it anyway, really, and started to channel the ideas in different ways with the large-scale drawings. So kind of doing a book kind of came at the right time, really. And then these are just to sort of finish with, these are some of the large-scale posters. You know, just to show how when they're like blown up to that size, you can kind of occupy a lot of space. And maybe we should hand around some of, I've got some zines here to hand around. And I suggest people buy them now because they're only £3 now, but when the book comes out next year on Verso, they'll be worth considerably more than that. So yeah, this was a way of occupying a really large space. This was an abandoned Shell canteen in Amsterdam. And doing these billboards, you know, it made me realise that, you know, I was working at my desk doing these really small, intricate drawings, really detailed, and publishing an A5 fanzine. But I could also take command of a much bigger space, you know, both, you know, inside buildings and on the street in billboards. And so yeah, these are just some posters that I've been working on. I'm doing projects at the Arnold Feeney in Bristol next year, where I'm doing billboards all across Bristol, critiquing the regeneration schemes and new shopping centres there as well. So some of these pages are directly lifted from the zine and just kind of pasted together. And again, I'm directly referencing that kind of anarcho-punk aesthetic. It's, you know, it's an obvious kind of, I just felt it was right to try and kind of restore that to it. So yeah, that's about it.